All right, good morning. We're going to get started, but before we get started, we do have a member of the APTO, Julie Schwimbeck, who would like to just say a few words before we get started with our presentation. Welcome, Julie.
Good morning, everybody. I'm so glad to see you all. I'm here to speak a little bit about the APTO, and it's particularly important this year with the junior class because one of the main events that we do each year is we sponsor the Junior Post-Prom Party, the JPPP, and it is a free event to all the students after prom. You don't have to attend prom to go to the event. And it's an all-night party, basically a party from 12 to 5 at the New England Sports Center. There's all sorts of fun activities and stuff. It is free to the students. It is obviously not free to the APTO. So all the parents, all the families will be getting solicitation letters. We hope that you will sponsor the event. It's really important to keep our kids safe and having a fun time after prom. And we also sponsor speakers, and in fact, we have a speaker tonight, which I hope you all can come and see, Dr. Ruth Poti. It will be a wonderful event, and we appreciate your support either by donating to the JPPP or becoming a PTO sponsor if you aren't one already. So thank you very much.
All right, thanks, Julie. All right, so good morning, guys. My name is Mrs. Connery. I'd like to welcome you and your parents to what we think is a very informative presentation. We're very fortunate to have 3 admissions counselors join us this morning to kind of share their insight around the admissions process with all of you. I'm going to ask that you guys please be very respectful. They've gotten up really early. This is probably a little early for some of you guys, huh? And they're here bright and early at 7:30 here this morning with us. So I'm going to ask you to please be respectful. No talking. Please put your cell phones away and let's, pay attention because they do have some very important information that they're going to be sharing with you that as you move through junior year and into senior year is going to become more and more relevant. All right? I want to take an opportunity to thank Ms. Hotchkin and Ms. Mackey. They're going to be moderating the event for us. And so at this point, I'm going to hand the mic off to Ms. Hotchkin so we can go ahead and get started.
Thank you. All right, so before we begin, I'd like to introduce our admissions counselors. We have Griffin Monahan from Boston University. All right, we have Jason Clem in the middle from Trinity College. And then we have John Chenier from Framingham State University. Welcome, guys.
Thank you for being here, guys. I'm going to kick things off. Earlier this month, we started talking with our juniors about beginning the process of searching for colleges that might be a good fit for them, and we've been encouraging them to visit. Jason, how important is it to visit campus, and does this impact the admissions decision?
Yeah, so I would say it's very important. I would encourage everyone to make a list of what they consider to be important and what they're looking for in a school. And that way, during that campus visit, you can sort of make sure the campus checks off the boxes, if you will. I can't tell you how many students I've talked to who say, oh, I know it sounds sort of cliche, but I just really got that, that feel that the school was the right fit. And I don't think it needs to be considered cliche because it's so widely felt, and I think it's the right feeling to get. So, highly recommended and highly important.
Excellent, thank you. Griffin, what types of opportunities do you offer prospective students who visit your campus in order to help them learn more about your school?
So when students visit our campus, we have an information session in which students hear from a member of the Board of Admissions, someone like myself, and a current student. So you get both the perspective of the admissions process and what student life is like. We then take you out on a tour. So all in all, you see campus, you hear from a member of the Board of Admissions, and that's about 2.5 hours. It's pretty comprehensive, so you can see campus, you can meet students, you can ask questions. We also have open houses in the fall and in the spring for juniors and seniors, or if you're more interested as a sophomore or freshman, you're welcome to join, but you all are juniors. So those are the 2 main ways that students can get involved in visiting our campus.
Thank you, Griffin. All right, John, if you live locally, how important is it that you visit campus?
I would say really important. Whether you are considering commuting or whether you are going to live on campus, either way, as Jason said, it's really important to get an idea and feel of what the campus is going to be like and what the community is going to sort of reflect back at you. We see students, that come on tours we're right on in Framingham on Route 9. And so we have students that even come on tour in Natick that are from Natick because they need to have a better idea of just what the university is and what we're all about and whether or not it's going to be a good choice for them to continue their education. Even though you may think that you're familiar with the school, you're going to want to take a deeper dive because it's going to be where you're spending the next 4, 5, or 2 years, depending where you start, of your life. And so it's important that you find a place where you feel you're going to call home for a few years, whether it's just between classes during the week, or if you're living on campus, you're going to be there 7 days a week. So it's important to just get a really good idea of the feel of campus and whether or not it's a place that you want to be, for the next 4 years of your life.
Okay, so we tell students that their transcript is the most important part of their application. Jason, why do colleges consider students' transcripts to be so important?
Yeah, so in regards to the importance of a student transcript, ultimately we're trying to set students up for success, not failure. So we really want to see that students can handle the level of academic rigor that we know they'll face once in college. So that's why we place so much value on not just the grades of a student, but really what kind of classes they're taking. Are they pushing themselves with more challenging classes that Algonquin has to offer? So that's why we place so much value, because it really gives us an assessment of how they're likely to perform in college and how they're likely to, I guess, like I said, handle the rigor once they get to that level.
Okay, thank you. John, what do you consider when looking at a student's transcript?
So as a state university, our review process is a little bit different than a private school. We do have set standard minimums for GPA and certain benchmarks that students need to meet in terms of taking 4 years of English, 3 years of lab science, 4 years of math, all of that. But one thing that we're looking for is really a consistent effort on the student's part, or one that's progressing on an upward slope. So that from freshman year through senior year, that they're challenging themselves, that they're performing consistently in the classroom and achieving academically, so that we can kind of hopefully predict that a student is going to be successful once they get to our campus. What's a little bit different about the state university is we do have sort of set minimums, and those are publicized on our website. Those are really the minimum requirements, so that's a really good guideline for students to get a really good idea of whether or not they're admissible. Those aren't set in stone, so we do make exceptions, and there are students who are above those criteria that may not get admitted. But ultimately, what we're looking for in sort of the aggregate is a consistent, rigorous academic schedule that's sort of trending towards them being successful at the college level. So if a student starts with like a 3.5 their freshman year, and all of a sudden senior year they've got a 1.9, we might, even though they might meet our minimum benchmark, we might consider whether or not they're ready to step into a college campus for their freshman year of college.
Thank you. Okay, so Griffin, we have a weighted GPA at Algonquin. Do you recalculate a student's GPA?
So at Boston University, we do recalculate. We look at the unweighted GPA. That means we are removing any additional weighting for advanced placement, honors courses. I'm also removing any elective courses or non-academic courses. Our Board of Admissions really wants to focus in on what are those core classes and how are you performing in them. The reason we remove any weighting is because we want to see how your GPA might compare to GPAs across the board, and I mean from students around the world, around the US. We do take into consideration the challenging nature of your courses in a measure we call rigor. The more rigorous your schedule might be, the more advanced placement courses or honors courses, the more rigorous that number is, the higher up of a rating you'll receive. So that's how we review ratings for rigor and for GPA.
Thank you.
All right, keeping with the idea of students' transcript, our students will soon be selecting their courses for next year, their senior year. I've heard a few of you mention rigor. Griffin and Jason, how important is it to maintain a rigorous schedule in your senior year and continue to enroll in core courses?
So again, to reiterate, what I said before, it's very important, and especially since it's so close to the next step of first year at college. I think it's very important. We actually pay pretty close attention to what classes a student is enrolled in. Again, are they pushing themselves with the more challenging classes that the school has to offer? So if those are AP and honors classes, we want to see that students are pushing themselves in those classes, and we want to see that they're continuing to perform at the level they've been performing. We also love to see an upward trend. So we know that students maybe didn't always have the best first or second year in high school, but showing that they've buckled down and really shown improvement and pushing themselves again in those challenging classes, it means a lot, and it's very important in our consideration of the application.
I would just add that in your senior year, you want to make sure that there's no red flags. Your grades haven't changed suddenly, or the challenging courses don't exist on your transcript anymore. So if you're taking all honors and advanced placement, and then senior year comes around, and you're just taking college prep courses or elective courses, that's going to be a red flag for me. So we want to see that you're performing at that highest level in the last year of high school, because you're moving on to university or college where the coursework is going to be challenging, and we want to make sure you're ready for that challenge.
Great, thank you. John, students often ask the question, is it better for me to take a course where I know I can get an A, or should I take a harder course and risk getting a lower grade? What's your feedback?
That's a really good question. I mean, it really lies with each student and their sort of drive and engagement in the classroom. Students, I don't feel, should just take an AP class because it's what everybody else is doing and sort of what the expectation is, or they think it might just look good on a college, application. It really is sort of thinking about, is this a level of academic rigor that I want to be engaged in for the whole year? And so if a student is sort of hasn't had that track record of that high academic rigor, and then all of a sudden senior year decides I'm going to take 3 AP courses, that's not necessarily setting themselves up for some success. So what we encourage students to do is to sort of be self-reflective and aware of how driven they are to be successful in those classrooms, whether or not they've had success in that subject area before, and that kind of helps guide a student's decision about whether or not they would rather get a C in an AP course or an A in an honors course, and that's really up to the student. Either way, we'll look towards, as my compatriots up here have said, we'll look for students who are choosing academic rigor, and then it looks like they're succeeding in those classes.
Thank you. So it sounds like students should be taking what's most appropriate for them. Yep. Okay. So Griffin, once a student has applied to a school and indicated what their senior courses are, how important is it for them to complete those courses?
I would say it's very important. I get emails all throughout the reading cycle or the admission cycle where a senior who has applied to Boston University will email me and say, hey Griffin, I just want to let you know I'm changing my schedule. I was taking maybe AP Calc, and now I'm taking just a elective course. Is this going to impact how you review my application? And the honest answer is, it probably will. Advanced Placement Calc is a very challenging course, and that probably helped you in the application review. If you're dropping that course and you're taking something that's a little bit easier, the way I review your transcript will change. So I think it is very important that if you are enrolling in a course senior year, you feel comfortable that you can complete that course. If you think you just need to drop down a level, maybe from advanced placement to honors, I think that's fine, but you need to make sure that you're having those active conversations with your guidance counselors and your teachers early and often so that you're not leaving a class with a withdraw fail on a transcript your senior year. Maybe you're leaving in a better stance than that. Just don't leave any red flags on that transcript.
Yeah, and juniors, this is something important that we're going to talk about next week when we talk about course selection, but when you do apply to colleges, you actually list all the courses that you are taking senior year. So you're listing both first and second semester. We also, your counselor, we send a transcript that lists all the courses that you're enrolled in as well for senior year. So if you do choose to drop a class after you've applied and after we've already sent your materials, we will make you contact each college by email and ask, is that okay to drop? As you were saying, will that impact my decision? So right now we have a lot of seniors coming up to us now that second semester started, and they're wanting to drop classes. So sometimes it doesn't make a difference, sometimes it does. So that's really important as you guys are selecting your courses, that you're sure these are courses that I want to take.
Can I just share one point about that as well? So if you make changes to your schedule mid-year and then you don't notify us, most colleges will do some sort of final review on your application after the point of admission and after the point of enrollment. So this usually comes in June at the end of your year. And so we will see if a student we are typically looking out to see if a student got a severe case of senioritis and all of a sudden failed the last quarter for their fourth year of English. And so that's something that's a review that we do almost at the point of where you're after graduation. And so we occasionally do have to send out letters in July telling a student that they're no longer admitted to our school because a student has started to sort of slack off or they've dropped the courses that we thought they were completing. And so that affects whether or not we feel that they're going to be prepared to enter our campus.
Yep. So it's not just not maintaining the course load, but also your grades.
Yep.
Okay.
Great, thank you. I'm going to talk a little bit about standardized testing. Many of our students are beginning to participate in test prep classes and registering for the upcoming SAT and ACT exams. Standardized testing often seems to cause a lot of anxiety for students and parents. John, are standardized test scores an important factor in evaluating candidates?
Yeah, this is going to range across which schools you're applying to. At Framingham State, this is the first year that we've gone with a test optional policy, and so students who are not applying to our honors program and not applying to a STEM area major can apply without their test scores. That being said, we do feel it's a pretty important measuring tool to sort of measure a student's academic performance in an environment where they've had to prepare for this, but also in a way that sort of really sort of concisely calculates out a student's academic skill and whether or not they're prepared, particularly for math, English, and writing. We view it in sort of incongruence with their transcript and with everything else when we do a holistic review, but the student's preparation for the SAT shows that they're serious about the admissions process, that they're serious about showing off their academic achievement, and that they're prepared to apply to both the schools that may require it and that are not. And that sort of tells us a little bit about a student's sort of seriousness about going on to the next level of their education.
Thank you. Jason, we understand that Trinity is also test optional. Can you explain what other factors are taken into consideration for potential students?
Sure, and I'll just add that our policy of test optional. I mean, we switched in 2015, and really the idea was we want students to feel that they can show in their application what represents them most. So if a student feels that their standardized test scores do not represent them, they should not feel obligated to submit them. And that's why I mentioned earlier that the transcript really is so important. We do place a lot of emphasis on academic transcript, letters of recommendation, essay, extracurricular activities, and demonstrated interest, showing how interested in the school they really are.
And Griffin, some colleges require students to take the SAT subject tests. Can you explain what a subject test is and how a student would know if a school requires a subject test?
So an SAT subject test is a shorter version of the SAT, and it's only in one specific content area. For example, you could take an SAT subject test for mathematics or US history. So you can kind of show off, oh, I'm excellent in social studies. I'm going to take a few subject tests in social studies or mathematics, whatever the topic might be. You can find out if it's required for a school or for a specific program within a school on their Board of Admissions website. So for example, if you went to bu.edu/admissions, for all of our programs, you'll see there's no requirement with the one exception of an accelerated medical program. We do require standardized subject tests for that. So just know the programs that you're applying to. Some may require it, some may not, but the onus is on you to make sure you look that up so you're ready to submit those by the time that you're applying.
So since we are talking about testing, I do want to remind juniors and their parents that Algonquin is offering test prep classes. There are 3 different sessions. All sessions cover test skills and strategies. Seats are limited, but there is space right now in all 3 sections. If you do want to register, we will have registration forms on the table when you leave. It will be $150, which is a very good price for test prep classes. I'm sure you guys would agree with that. And that would be registering through the main office. So there's forms available when you leave. Okay, so students and parents often have questions about extracurricular activities. They often ask whether it's good to be involved in a few activities or that you're passionate about, or a lot of different activities to show you're well-rounded. So Jason, how important are extracurricular activities in the admissions process?
I mean, extracurricular activities are definitely important. I don't think students necessarily need to feel a pressure or an obligation to be involved in an extremely high number or a wide variety of activities. And one of my associate directors, I'm going to steal a quote from her, it's my job to build a well-rounded class. It's your job to do what you want in high school. So for that reason, we really do take into consideration, you know, what you've listed for activities, but also your explanations and how long you've been involved in certain activities. So I would say we place just as much value on sustained activities, something you've dedicated a lot of time to over the years and that you've dedicated to, you know, multiple years. So really, I don't think you need to feel, like I said, an extreme amount of pressure. Obviously, we like to see that a student is very involved because we're looking for students that are going to be prepared to step outside their comfort zones and get involved once they step foot onto the college campus. But that said, I think we value, like I said, a wide variety of activities just as much as we do activities that have been sustained, that a student has shown dedication to over the years.
Thank you. So John, many of our students actually do have to work instead of doing activities, and I know that's a concern for some students. How do you view part-time work, and what happens if a student decides to do work instead of activities?
I think we very much view it almost the same as an activity. I mean, it requires the student to be organized, prioritize, do some time management, and those are all important skills for a student as they approach college. So whether they're running in circles around a track or they're stocking shelves at Target, both of those activities require a student to dedicate time and energy and structure their schedule so that it indicates to us that the student is ready to sort of do that when they get to college.
Okay, thank you. Griffin, do you have anything you'd like to add?
I'd just say, find what excites you and be excellent at it when you can. So whether it's stocking shelves or running loops around a track, find what really excites you and try and communicate that with us.
Okay, thank you.
All right, so I'm going to chat a little bit about recommendations. In May, we will be discussing letters of recommendations with the students. Jason, could you share your thoughts on how many letters a student should have and who they should be asking to write a letter for them?
I'm hearing some chuckles next to me because this is a question we get often. And my recommendation is to send the amount of letters that we ask for. We ask for 1 letter of recommendation from a counselor and 2 letters of recommendation from teachers, unless there is extremely important information that is not communicated in those letters, the amount that we ask for. There's really no need to submit more than that. But that said, we are looking for students or for recommendations that students have developed strong relationships with, that can really communicate their skills and how they've flourished over the years or watch them grow. And we definitely enjoy getting to know these students better through these teacher and counselor recommendations.
And Griffin, how are the recommendations used during the admissions process?
I like to view letters of recommendation as a point of reference. So they are corroborating and they're providing new information. If you list that you're involved in this extracurricular activity, but you don't kind of describe what it's all about, maybe this person who's writing the letter of recommendation goes into depth and explains what you actually do and the impact it's had on your community. They're advocating for you. So think about who you're reaching out to and what stories they know about you and how they can present you in the best light. So same for your guidance counselors. If you had a change in schedule and you think it might need some explanation, try and ask them that. Hey, let's talk a little bit of why I changed from honors to non-honors or from this class to that class. It's more information, it's more context so that I can better understand you as an applicant and as a student.
Right, as a follow-up question, let's say a student is applying for engineering. How important is it that they have a math recommendation?
It will be helpful, but I don't think it is essential. At least this is from my perspective from BU admissions. If it's a core academic area, English, mathematics, science, social science, foreign language, that is wonderful. I think that person has seen you in a challenging environment. I would say stick to those core academic areas. You can, if you have a teacher for an elective course who knows you really well, maybe have that as a supplemental letter of recommendation, but it doesn't have to be specific to your applied program of studies.
And John, as another follow-up question, do you feel that it's particularly important for a junior year teacher to be writing these recommendations, or could it span across the student's entire high school career?
Yeah, I think it really, again, sort of to Jason's point, it sort of depends on the guidelines for the school. I've seen fantastic letters of recommendation from employers for students that are working, or from coaches, or from advisors, or pastors at a church. What we want is sort of a genuine and authentic look into a student's qualifications for our school. And so if that comes from a junior year teacher, or someone maybe they had sophomore year, we're sort of looking for some insight from someone who knows the student outside of what we see on their transcript, their SAT scores, et cetera.
Okay, so we're going to have a May workshop with our juniors, and we're going to be talking about the college essay, which I know is a dreaded thing for many of our students. In the past, we've found that students are often concerned about finding that perfect topic. As admissions counselors, you do read a lot of essays. Okay, so Griffin, what do you think makes a good college essay?
A good college essay is an essay where you're able to communicate who you are clearly to me, or whoever is reading it on the Board of Admissions. A good college essay, if you're creative, it's creative. If you're funny, you're funny. If you're not funny, don't try to be funny. It comes off really poorly. For example, a standout essay I read earlier this season, a student was writing how their keyboard was broken and their caps lock wasn't working. And then I was noticing, wait, they're not capitalizing anything. And then I had to read a little bit deeper, and I went, oh wait, it's because their caps lock is broken. And then they wrote about how they engineered a solution and they fixed their keyboard, and then all of a sudden the punctuation and the capitalization was correct again. I was like, wow, that is so creative. I've never seen that before. Now, if you try and do that and you apply to Boston University, I'll probably remember that I had this conversation with you, so don't do that. Plagiarism is a no-no. But be yourself. Truly try and take some time to hone in who you are, who that internal dialogue is in your head, and communicate it to me in the most professional and appropriate way possible.
Okay, thank you. So Jason, students tend to feel quite a bit of pressure around that college essay. Do you have any advice to give them beyond Griffin's?
I like Griffin's advice a lot. I really like the idea of telling us who you are and clearly communicating it. Unfortunately, I don't think there is a be-all, end-all answer of how to write the best essay. But to echo Griffin's words again, I often find some of the best essays are the ones that are the most self-reflective, where students have really taken a time to explore who they are. And again, communicate that clearly. It doesn't need to be an essay about your 10-step plan on how you're going to solve world hunger. It can be something incredibly simple that you've taken the time to explore. And honestly, I think the essay is a really good opportunity for students to tell us something that we haven't had a chance to already learn about them in the application, something that we might not necessarily find in your extracurricular activities or in your letters of recommendation. Often I feel like it's an explanation or in addition to a very brief description of an extracurricular activity that maybe we're not as familiar with. But again, I think a self-reflective essay where a student has taken the time to help us get to know them through their essay, those go a long way.
Great. Okay, so John, we understand that Framingham State does not require students to submit an essay as part of their application. If students do choose to, will that be taken into account?
Yeah, I mean, we are a Common App school, so the Common App does have a section where you can submit a 650-word essay. We do, especially with our SAT optional policy, we'll definitely be looking for that. It very much sticks out to us when a student chooses not to submit an essay. That being said, I mean, even though we don't require it, doesn't mean that you should put any less work into it. It does demonstrate to us, that you're telling us a little bit more about what we might not see on your transcript or in your SAT scores or in other sections of your application. So it is a good opportunity for students to kind of, in an authentic way, kind of represent themselves. We do read, every essay that comes across, and it does especially play into our consideration for students who are applying to particular majors like English, but also if they're applying for the honors program, we absolutely want to see an essay, as well as those students who might be close to like the minimum benchmarks. So if a student is just barely meeting our SAT and GPA requirements, then an essay would certainly help a student sort of stand out.
And if I could add just one more part, proofread. Word won't tell you when you use the wrong word. So if you write, you're very excited to go to collage, Word's not going to tell you that you use collage instead of college. It happens. Don't be the student who writes about collages instead of college.
And we can also tell when your mom picks up the thesaurus. I'm like we know when mom has written half your essay. So just write your own essay, and yeah.
Yeah, we read essays as well, and we can tell when that happens. So, thank you.
All right, so as juniors, our students are just beginning the college search process, and they will soon be introduced to admissions lingo. Jason, can you explain the difference between early action, early decision 1 and 2, regular decision, and rolling admission?
Okay, let's see, where to start? So, the difference between early action and early decision is one is binding and one is not. So, early action is where you can apply to a school early, usually an early deadline, and you will hear back very quickly, and it is not a binding decision to that school if you are admitted. Early decision is when you are applying to a school and you are actually signing an agreement stating that if admitted, you are promising to enroll in that school. Early decision 2 is that same binding agreement of an application, simply at a later date. So Trinity has an early decision 1, November 15th, and an early decision 2 deadline of January 1st. Regular decision, typically the most popular, is regular. It is not binding, and typically the decision is a little bit slower. So just to give context, Trinity's regular decision deadline is January 15th, and typically we return decisions back around mid-March, so a couple months later, as opposed to maybe 1 month from our early decisions. Did I catch all 4?
Rolling.
Rolling admissions is where there is no deadline. A school will continue to accept applications year-long and evaluate them and return decisions in accordance to how they are submitted. And that will vary. I know some schools will return decisions within a couple weeks, and other schools it might be a couple months.
Thank you. All right, John, what type of applicant would you consider to be a candidate for early action admission?
Early action tends to be a little bit higher achieving student or student who's just eager to find out. We typically find that students apply early action to Framingham State who know that Framingham State is where they want to attend. It's possibly their first choice, but also students who, we also see students that are eager to find out about an honors program, merit scholarship, or they might need to sort of get their decision sooner so they can apply for scholarships that are outside of the admissions process. So we have some scholarships that have separate applications and application deadlines. And so students will sometimes complete their application for admission to Framingham State by the early action deadline in November, and then spend the rest of their time perhaps applying for the other scholarships that are available, because those deadlines are usually like February 1st, February 15th, so it gives them some time to know whether or not they're admitted and whether or not they'd potentially be eligible for one of those scholarships.
Is there an advantage, and if so, what is the advantage for applying early action?
As a public university, we admit any student who we deem qualified, so it doesn't actually affect when a student, whether or not they would be admitted if they apply early action or regular decision. For students that apply closer to regular decision, they may not hear back quite as quickly as they might like, whereas early action, we guarantee that they would hear by the Christmas break.
Griffin, what type of applicant would you consider to be a strong candidate for early decision?
So early decision is that binding agreement. A student who knows that the school that they're applying to is their number one, they want to be there more than anywhere else in the world, that is when you apply early decision. So if you know that Boston University is the place that you've always been dreaming of, you want to go watch a hockey game, you want to cheer on the Terriers, it's when you apply early decision. Early decision candidates, you are very enthusiastic about the program you're applying to. Maybe you feel that your academics might not be as strong as the general pool of applicants, so you can get a little bit of a boost when you apply through early decision. The reason we do that is we know that these students are excited about BU, that when they come to Boston University, they're going to bring that excitement and they'll get engaged in our community. They'll maybe start a club, get involved in volunteer service, become an RA, a residence assistant. We really like to see engaged students, and this is one way that we can kind of seek them out in the application process. Do know that because it's a binding agreement, you got to think about your finances, your financial aid packaging and scholarship. So if you think that, oh, I can only attend a school if I receive the full scholarship, maybe early decision might not be your best option because you need to consider what different financial aid packages you'd be getting. Do know, at least with BU, when you apply early decision, if you do not receive enough financial aid, you can appeal your financial aid package, and then after one appeal, if the financial aid package at that point is not enough, if it's not sufficient, we can void the early decision agreement and you're no longer in that binding agreement to attend the university. If it's financially irresponsible, we don't want to force anyone into a situation like that.
Thank you. And John, what does it mean if a student is deferred as an early applicant?
So that typically means that we're looking maybe for more, at least at Framingham State, we're looking for more information on that candidate. So we may want to see a student's success in their senior schedule. They may not maybe meet one of our benchmarks for admission, or there's something specific about their application that doesn't quite meet our requirements yet that we want to see sort of demonstrated over time. Typically, if we ask a student if we move a student from early action to regular decision, we will typically ask for some more information. We might ask for first quarter grades or for SAT scores if a student hasn't submitted them, so that we can get a better insight into whether or not a student's going to be prepared to step onto our campus.
Okay, so Griffin, if a student declares a major but doesn't meet the admissions requirement for that major, will you offer them admissions within another major?
So there's one program in which we will do that. So say you're applying to the College of Arts and Science for philosophy and you don't meet the academic criteria that we're looking for, you can be reconsidered for our College of General Studies, CGS for short. CGS is the only program where we will reconsider students. So you actually indicate that on the Common App application, that if you cannot be selected for your first program of study, so say philosophy in this example, you would like to be reconsidered for this other program. So College of General Studies is the one exception. For any other program, we will not reconsider.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so John, does your school have majors that are more competitive than others? And which majors tend to be more competitive?
Yeah, I mean, we tend to follow comparable admissions guidelines for almost every major. That being said, for some of our STEM majors, we are looking for pretty specific SAT scores. Particularly for transfer students, that's where a lot of the competition sort of comes in. So there are some if a student starts at a community college and then would like to transfer into one of our programs, that's where it really becomes more selective. Particularly for our students in our education majors, food and nutrition science, because we really have to have serious students ready to jump in as juniors if they're transferring in. We may guide students into, similarly, we might guide them into a different major. So if a student does not have the appropriate math skills for our food and nutrition science program in particular, they will like if we were just to admit them as freshmen, they would likely get eaten alive because it's just really intensive program. So we might then, instead of not admitting them or being more selective, we might choose to offer them admission as an undeclared major, and then sort of give them the opportunity their freshman year sort of to perform their up to their aptitude, and sort of prove to us that they're ready.
Okay, thank you. Jason, is it easy to change your major once you've been admitted to a school?
Yes, at least at Trinity, it's very easy to switch your major. Students do it all the time. I think the average is 3 switches for students, and we encourage it. We want students to explore what they're most interested in. We want students. It's our whole idea of liberal arts, is taking a wide variety of fields of study in your education. So it's very easy. Students will sometimes major and then try to add a major for a double major, or pick up a minor. Students don't need to declare a major until second semester of sophomore year at Trinity. So again, we really try to foster that curiosity and that mobility in a student's education, and just give them the opportunity to switch.
Okay, I think that's very common at liberal arts colleges. Griffin, how about at Boston University?
So we have a similar program in which a student, if they want, say you're in philosophy and you want to be in business, you just take the Intro to Business course, and with a passing mark, you can then transition into that program. Do know that depending on at the point where you are changing programs, you could add more semesters to your graduation. There are very specific courses for some of our majors that students only have the opportunity to complete later on, so you can't transfer some of those classes over early. So you just want to make sure you have a really good plan when you are trying to transfer. And some programs might have additional requirements. If you want to be in our College of Fine Arts for theater or music or design, you need to audition or you need to submit a portfolio, and that's an artistic review. If you don't pass it, you can't transition into that program. So just make sure you are prepared and you know the full plan of how you are going to graduate from where you are at that point of time.
Yeah, if I could just add, I knew there was something I was forgetting, and as Griffin mentioned, having a plan, working with your advisor as closely as possible. A lot of students will have an idea of what they want to major in, and I think satisfying the requirements of that major early on makes it that much easier to either switch or add on an additional major.
Okay, thank you.
Over the past few years, we've heard that demonstrated interest can be a factor in the admissions process. Jason, I know you actually mentioned that earlier. John, can you give an example of what demonstrated interest means?
Sure, it's pretty straightforward. It's almost exactly what the sort of phrase means. It's sort of that you're demonstrating interest in our school. So that can be everything from attending an information session. If a admissions counselor comes to visit the school, making sure that you're sort of signing up for that with your guidance department, and going and attending and asking the questions. We also see if a student comes on tour or decides to do an overnight or a classroom visit. That's also really good, as well as students who might alert us that they've attended like one of our gallery openings or a talk by one of our professors, because it shows that a student is sort of engaged in our process and is sort of trying to make a determination about our school and sort of exploring whether or not we're the right fit. If a student comes and takes a tour, it typically shows us that a student is quite interested and that we're probably going to be a school that they'll apply to, because if you're taking time out to come to Framingham, typically with a parent or two, that sort of tells us that you're sort of seriously considering us. That being said, there are, this is sort of some admissions insight, is that we do have systems that sort of track all of this. So similar to the way that if you look at a pair of shoes online and then go and sign into your email, and all of a sudden that pair of shoes is in an advertisement right next to your email. We don't get quite that creepy, but we do recognize when students may contact our office with questions, or they might check on their status. This is going to be treated differently at different schools. I know of one school that does not want to hear from you during the admissions process unless you're coming on a scheduled tour. So if you call them and ask questions about whether or not your transcript is there, they're probably just going to deny you right then, because you should know that as an applicant. That being said, not every school treats it that way. We want you to be engaged in the process, so we encourage students to reach out if they have questions, because it means that you're making a more educated choice about where you're ultimately going to go to school.
Well, John, I think it's important to note, you mentioned the transcript, to get online and actually look at the portal. Don't ask questions like, do you require SATs, when that's something that students can just go and look up online.
Absolutely. I mean, that's one indication to us that a student isn't serious about our school if they have some very basic questions about the admissions criteria or the school itself. I don't know if you all see this, but there are times when I get supplemental essays from students describing their profound interest in some program that Framingham State does not offer. And we're sort of like, this is on our website. Like, this is easily searchable. And so if you don't know that, then we know that you're not serious about our school, or that you're not serious about the college application process and the prospect of coming to Framingham. So.
And John, quickly, how important is it that you hear from the students and not the parents?
Really important. This is, we have a variety of terms for parents in admissions offices, everything from stealth bombers to snow plows to, a new one I heard recently was a submarine. So there's a parent who just sort of surfaces and then strikes, like all of a sudden. And this is not really appropriate, right? This is a student's step into adulthood. And so parents need to respect that, and they need to understand that a student is now responsible for their own education on our campus. They may be enjoying mac and cheese at your house on the weekends, but they're spending the majority of their time with us, which means that they're responsible for managing their lives on our campus. And they also aren't legally allowed to talk to you about a lot of things, because your students are adults. So notice that I'm looking at the sides of the room now. This is a student's opportunity to join the adult world with other students that are joining the adult world, and they need to be responsible for that. And we understand the number of times that I get, while I'm paying for it, over the phone, and I have to say to the parent, like, well, your son is 18 and they're legally an adult, and I can't share with you how they're doing in English 101. Like, you should have a conversation with your son. And so that's really where we have to legally draw the line, but also it's most appropriate for a student to start sort of managing these things. We obviously understand that parents are very heavily involved in their students' education, and that it's important for them to stay engaged. But we won't be giving you your son or daughter's password so you can access their student portal, so you can check up and make sure that they're, reloading their dining dollars.
Thank you. Griffin and Jason, do your colleges track demonstrated interest? And if so, how?
So we do track demonstrated interest really whenever you're on campus, whenever you're engaging with us. So if you're just sending us a couple of emails or you're responding to emails. And so this doesn't really apply to you all, but say all of a sudden you move away and you're living in Kansas and you don't have the opportunity to get your feet on BU's campus to look and take a tour. You could attend a virtual event. Many schools are rolling these out where it's actually like online seminars where it's a live broadcast of maybe a current student, maybe a professor, maybe folks from the Board of Admissions who are actually doing live Q&A in a streaming format. That's one way that you can get involved and kind of show that you're interested in that university or college without ever having to actually be there in person. So get creative when you want to try and show you are truly interested in that institution.
Yeah, I'll just add, we try to create opportunities for students who want to connect with us So if you're living in Kansas or you're living in the Midwest or West Coast, we visit those areas. We will travel to your school. So a way you can demonstrate interest is by coming to our visit, showing up and having a conversation with us. If you're not available, if you can't get out of that test, we also offer even Skype interviews now, so you can connect with us, on the line, even just over the phone. We really, again, we want to give you the opportunity to be able to show your interest. So we're trying to make ourselves available. We even recently offered interviews in Boston. Typically, for Mass and Connecticut, we say, hey, you should be able to come to us, but we understand that not all students have those opportunities. So again, just that additional opportunity to engage with us and show that you've done your homework and you've learned, or you're at least interested in learning more about Trinity or our school, it definitely goes a very long way, and we do keep track of that.
So I'm just going to throw a question out there about social media. Twitter, Instagram, whatever students are using. Is that something any of you guys are checking as admissions?
We don't actively check it for like each candidate unless there's sort of a red flag of some kind. It is a student's, we recognize that it's a student's right to free speech and to represent themselves however they feel is appropriate for themselves. That being said, I'm just gonna tell you to just lock it all down right now. Like, go home tonight and just put it on like the NSA level privacy settings. Because it is, the number of times that we might have a red flag from a student or alerted to something, we may go and just sort of do a simple Google search or search Facebook or whatever, and we may find that picture of you standing in the woods with a red Solo cup from sophomore year in high school, and that may be a red flag for some admissions officers. And so we want to make sure, I mean, that's the best advice I can give, is sort of, if there's something out there that you don't want us to see, make sure we don't see it and that it's not available for us to find. We encourage students to engage with us, though, on social media. So our admitted class on Facebook, and then any student who joined us, we have Facebook groups, Snapchat groups. You can follow and participate on Twitter as well, and Instagram. So there's ways to engage with us on social media. I would say that once you're through the admissions process is when you can sort of take get a little more liberal with it. But overall, like during your senior year, during the admissions process, just lock it all down, go through your feed, delete things that you know are inappropriate. As you see on the news every day, somebody gets caught saying something inappropriate or posting an inappropriate picture, and it comes back to haunt them 5 years later. And so I would encourage you to spend some serious time now doing that, because it's not even just us, it's also employers will do this. So this, again, is sort of a step into the real world and a step into the adult world, where any of these things that are available for public consumption are available for public consumption, and not only us, but also your classmates, coaches, future employers, look out for this stuff. So
I would like to add that if you engage with us on social media, think about what you're sharing with us. We do have moments where prospective students or even admitted students, current students, write some very inappropriate things, and that will result in either their admissions decision possibly being changed or their current enrollment at the university. They might have to take a leave of absence, or they might just be asked to leave the university. Your words that you publish out there, there's a good chance that they stay out there for a while. So think critically and carefully what your audience might be. If someone might be able to take something out of context and put you in a negative situation or put you in a negative light, just don't put yourself in that situation. It's avoidable. Joe, think before you post.
I don't think I could have said it any better from either. We're not actively looking, but again, be smart, be professional, be careful. Don't be that one case where we are more or less forced to make an admissions change because of some inappropriate post. Be smart.
Thank you. Just a little bit about financial aid and scholarships. John, how can students and parents find what you require for financial aid documents?
It's pretty straightforward, and you're going to find this on pretty much every college's website. So similar to the admissions process, the financial aid process is pretty straightforward. There are set requirements and criteria. So it's obviously the FAFSA. For most private schools, it's going to also be completing the CSS, which both these gentlemen can talk a little bit further on. It's really, it's a pretty standard process through the beginnings of it. We might identify that a student is eligible for some sort of merit aid through their admissions process. As I mentioned earlier, there might be some additional aid that students can apply for outside of the admissions process that may be available. But then after that point, once a student has received their package from the financial aid department, there may be, at some schools, there may be sort of a negotiation process, sort of some back and forth about what may or may not be available to a student if a student feels they need some additional aid. But fairly often, it's pretty straightforward. What the student gets through the admissions process and through the financial aid process initially is typically what their package is going to look like. One thing to consider is that for some schools, the financial aid process is separate from the admissions process. So if you have questions about your financial aid package, the admissions office may or may not have an answer for how you can navigate that. So that's sort of another thing to consider when you reach out to the school is who is the most appropriate office to contact with questions about any of this. But the FAFSA has become a little bit easier now that students can do it a year prior to when they could before. So students can start next October. They can get a really good idea, or even now actually, that you can get a prior FAFSA, which will tell you how much federal aid you're eligible for. And this number remains true at pretty much every school, regardless of where you apply. And then the institutional aid is where you'll see some pretty drastic differences between schools. But ultimately, the process is pretty standard, pretty straightforward. You submit a FAFSA, submit your CSS, and then any other disclosure requirements that a school might have. And then we make a decision, and you get it, and then we hope that you come.
So, John, you mentioned the FAFSA, which everybody would be filling out if they are applying for financial aid. And I know then a lot of the private schools require the CSS profile. Do you want to just comment on what that is?
The CSS profile is completed through the College Board, so it's essentially another form in which you're submitting financial aid or financial information about your parents, your guardians, what debts, assets they might have, what type of income. And for us, it's just another point of reference so that we can really provide an accurate financial aid package.
Thanks. All right, so Griffin, when are students typically required to have their documents submitted? Are deadlines different for early and regular decision applications?
Yes, the deadlines do differ. So we have the financial aid deadlines the same as the application deadlines. Early decision, you're applying usually well before December, and then regular decision, you're applying, usually it's the first Tuesday of January. You do hear back with those corresponding deadlines. So early decision, you do hear back earlier, and you receive a tentative financial aid package at that time. The reason it is tentative is the university budget, so not just admissions and financial aid, but the entire university has not set its budget until a few weeks later. But usually we provide an accurate estimate. If anything, it only changes upwards.
And just for parents, we will have a financial aid night in early fall, which goes over a lot of all this information. So I know it sounds a lot right now, but we will go into that more in the fall. Okay. So Jason, how can students and parents find out about the scholarships available at the schools they're applying to?
Yeah, I think scholarships are always going to be on a school-by-school basis. So the best way is talk to counselors, talk to us. Don't be afraid to reach out. As John mentioned, some schools you may need to talk to the financial aid office. But in terms of merit-based scholarships, yeah, the best way is through us. Never hesitate to ask. I can say that at least for Trinity, all students that apply are considered for merit-based scholarships. They don't need to apply for specific scholarships. But yeah, we're the best point of contact in that regard, so don't hesitate to reach out. We're here to help.
Thanks.
For a variety of reasons, some students decide to take a year off between high school and college, or in other words, they take a gap year. John, what are the benefits for taking a year off?
It really depends on the student. We like to see students who make use of their gap year in a meaningful way. So if they are choosing to either defer their admission for a year or have just decided to take a year off after high school, that sort of phrase year off is kind of tricky because you might be taking a year off of like formal school, but we want to see students sort of occupying their time with something meaningful that's going to demonstrate their interest in continuing on in college or in a specific field. So we typically like to see that a student has maybe taken on some additional, service opportunities, or they have traveled, or they've gotten a meaningful job that might give them insight into their major. Or sometimes students just take the year off and they sort of let us know that they need to do that to work and save up money for their freshman year. I will say this, though, that very rarely does a student save up enough money to pay for more than one semester by taking the year off. So I would, if that's your intention, I'm hoping that you're working 40 hours a week and putting away every penny. What we do like to see is that students sort of take that time to do some self-reflection and kind of and sort of gain some awareness about where they want to be and why they're going to college. So students who might travel or, again, work or might take on a service opportunity, that's a great opportunity for students to really kind of explore where they see themselves, down the road, and what kind of work they'd like to do when they get to college.
Griffin, how do you view a gap year from an admission standpoint?
So I'm just going to almost repeat everything that was just said. Just share that information with us, whatever you're doing. If you do enroll in classes, say you're taking a couple of courses at a community college, you're at Worcester State, or you're at QCC, you're just taking some classes, you will need to send those transcripts to us because we want to ensure that you were not at any point a full-time student. If you enroll in enough classes where you're a full-time student and you're applying to BU, you are now a transfer applicant. You are not a first-year freshman. So you just want to make sure that if you are taking classes, you're submitting those transcripts to us, and that you're not, or if you want to transfer, you're absolutely welcome to do so. But just know that if you enroll full-time at another institution during your gap year, that gap year has now become your first semester of college.
Great. Now I have a question for all of you, and we'll start with John and go down the line. Can a student apply to your school and then decide to defer their admission until the following year because they want to take a gap year?
Yes.
Yes, a student can. I would just add that a student does need, I think Griffin mentioned it, does need to communicate with us if they are planning to apply to another school. So we'll warrant that gap year, for a number of different reasons that John was going into, but you are required, at least for Trinity, to communicate that you're planning to apply to another school if that does come into your decision as well.
Yes.
Great, thank you. I think we're going to open it up now to questions from the audience, and we might have some follow-up questions after. You guys can raise your hand and we can pass out the mic for you.
Are any of the essays weighted more than the others? For example, is the Common App more important than the supplement, or vice versa?
I wouldn't say one weighs more than the other. I think they're both helpful tools as we review your application. We understand that the Common App essay is being sent out to many schools, and it's also usually a little bit longer than supplemental essays. For supplemental essays, they're usually specific to the institution you're applying to. So for BU, it's why would you like to attend Boston University? So if you make it clear to us that you've never researched BU and you write about another institution in the city of Boston that you're really excited about, well, that's probably not going to help you out. So just make sure you know the purpose of these essays. Common App essay, usually for us to get to know you. Supplemental essays, it's usually why are you most interested in that program you're applying to or the institution.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and add, so Trinity College doesn't have a supplemental, but we have optional essay prompts. So obviously the Common App essay is required, so I suppose more important, but the optional essay is important too. We were talking about demonstrated interest earlier, and both optional essays give you the chance to talk about either how you researched Trinity or why you are especially interested in Trinity, or how you might use your education to give back to the local or global community. So by choosing to answer this optional essay, you're again showing that you're taking the time to tell us more about yourself, but more about how you might get involved at our school. So again, it's just an additional way that you can show interest in our school. So it is also important.
I think rule of thumb, if something's optional, you should do it.
Yes.
Okay.
If you transferred in from like a different state and the curriculum's different, does that affect like the way you look at the GPA?
Clarify that for a second?
Yeah.
So if you're a transfer student and you're coming and I think what you're saying is you come to Algonquin, but maybe you were at a different school before. Are you looking at the full transcript? Is that kind of what you're saying? Okay.
Yeah, I mean, we want to consider a student's academic work over their entire life cycle in high school. So it's sometimes it will depend on how it's shown on your current transcript. We see some schools who might, if you switch schools, it might come in as that you just passed all the classes, and so there's no grade level or grade, whether it's a numerical grade or an alphabetical grade. And so we will go off of whatever is demonstrated on the transcript. So that's a good conversation to have with your school counselor about how it's going to look when it gets sent out, so that at least you're aware of what an admissions counselor is going to be looking at.
In those situations, we usually actually will reach out to your high school, or actually to you as the applicant, and say, hey, we only see grades for senior year. Everything else is showing up as a P for pass or a T for transfer. Can you please submit your high school transcript from your previous high school? On a note of curriculum, so Massachusetts and Kansas will vary. The reason I say Kansas so much is I travel there. I read transcripts from all over the US and all over the world, and we understand that curriculum will vary. Students are admissible so long as they're meeting certain admission criteria. At least for BU, our admission criteria is not set on any single state's curriculum.
And I think to add to that, here at Algonquin, we do include all the grades from your previous school. So as long as you got a letter grade or numerical grade, we do include that on the Algonquin transcript, as well as the name of the school that you had attended. And that's also something guidance counselors that we would include in the letter if someone did transfer, and maybe explain some of that information.
As each of you mentioned, there's certain discrepancies about whether or not supplemental information should be written or included in the application. If you submit supplemental recommendations or even essays, are they always going to be read?
I want to make sure I heard that right. Supplemental information, will it always be read? Yeah. So we have a holistic review process. So we're going through an entire application. Again, the goal is to get to know you as best as possible and ultimately assess if you're ready to handle the academic rigor and the lifestyle at our school. So again, ultimately, I would encourage you to make sure that the supplemental information is important to you and that it really does add to your application information that we haven't already gotten a chance to understand about you. Well, there's oftentimes there's an additional information space that can communicate something that you haven't had the chance to tell us in any other part of your application. And oftentimes it's very important information to maybe understand why you switch schools, or I often read about why an academic performance may have changed due to a personal experience or issue. So that information is really helpful in providing us context to your entire application. So absolutely, we will look at it.
I would just add, when appropriate and relevant, I do have transcripts or, applications where usually a typical application is about 15 pages, and I see that it's over 50. All right, there's a lot of extra pages here. Sometimes students submit information that isn't very relevant to the admissions process. So maybe you don't need to submit your senior year AP English essays at the end of your application. Or if you're not applying to an art program and a portfolio isn't required, yeah, you can share some of that information with us if you want to scan it into a PDF and add it, but I'm not a professor of art. I can't artistically review that information other than saying you submitted it on your application. So just think critically, is this going to be the most helpful to share?
Yeah, I think that word relevant and appropriate are probably really important. It's that sort of, keep in mind that we are reading thousands and thousands of applications every year. And so when the Common App has a word limit on your essay of 650 words, and then you separately email me a 3,000 word version, it's likely that your 650 word is probably better. and I also, we have, that kind of supplemental stuff that's sort of not asked for and isn't necessarily appropriate may not put your application in a better light. It may actually impact my decision about whether or not you can follow directions, very simple ones, and whether or not you can sort of respect the process that we have set forward. And because there's reasons that we have the list of required things that we do, and then we're not asking for more, possibly because we're reading. Last year, I think I read 1,800 essays. So when I get an extra one that's 5 times the length, it's sort of like, do I have time for this? And then do I need to see this? And is this appropriate?
How do extracurricular activities affect the way you look at an individual's GPA?
I look at an individual's what? GPA. I would say so. From an extracurricular standpoint, that word "extra" is kind of the important piece. If we might see that a student is so over-involved that it's having a negative impact on their academic performance, that's a pretty drastic red flag for us. That if a student is sort of occupying themselves with being the secretary of the German club and having a part-time job and running circles around the track and then also on the swim team and babysitting, and there are only so many hours in a day. And the reason that you're coming to college is to study and to pursue an academic life for those 4 years. And so we want students that are prepared to do that, because that's our primary concern, is educating you and ensuring your academic success. That being said, we want to see that a student is involved and that they're passionate, authentically passionate, or involved in something that's important to them over time. And so we want to see that a student knows how to balance their time, that time management becomes important, because once you sort of leave these walls here and you join a college campus, it's very easy to sort of become over-involved and to and I could share this personally. Like my first semester freshman year, I thought I could keep doing all the things that I was doing in high school, and very quickly found out that I was burning the candle at both ends. And my second semester sort of dropped 2 activities that I thought were important, but that I realized were having a negative impact on my academic performance. So that's really, we want to see a student who has a balanced life, and shows academic success, because that's our primary concern, but then is also that extracurricular piece is sort of the extra kind of icing on the cake for us when we look at that.
With letters of recommendation, you said like usually one guidance counselor then 2 teachers. For the teachers, does it matter like what year you had them, whether that's freshman, sophomore, or junior year, or even senior year?
So I think that's going to vary by school, right? I gave the Trinity College requirement, which is one letter by a counselor and 2 letters by a teacher. And typically we recommend that it be either 11th or 12th grade, just because it's more recent. It gives us a better picture of who you've developed into most recently. But again, each school may have their preferences as to how many letters of recommendation they want and who they specifically want those recommendation letters from.
A general rule of thumb is the more recent you've had interactions with the teacher, the better. They can write about you as a more matured student who's grown in the classroom and in your school community.
I think one thing I'd like to add is right now we have, during the application process for our seniors, we have had students ask for, let's say, 2 or 3 letters of recommendation, maybe a math, an English, and maybe an art teacher. But the school is they're looking maybe for 2 academic teachers or 1 recommendation max. We've had issues where our students are asking for too many recommendations, and then those recommendations are being sent. And let's say if your art teacher sent the letter before your math teacher or your English teacher, that's the recommendation that the college is receiving. So that's for some colleges that actually have a maximum limit.
How much do you weigh the optional SAT essay on a student's application?
How much do we weigh the optional essay? So in terms of how Trinity weighs it, we really just want to see that you're answering the question. It's typically not an especially long essay, or at least as long as the Common App essay. So really, we're just looking for the fact that you've taken some time to research, to make it specific to our school. Again, our options are either how you would use your liberal arts education to give back to the local or global community, or how you connect with our school's mission statement. So either option, we just want to see that it is specific to our school, that you've taken the time to do a little more research and show us how specifically you might either get involved or give back. So again, it's just a matter of being punctual and to the point and answering the prompt. And again, that just gives you, I guess, an additional bump. I mean, it allows us to see that you are showing interest in our school, and again, have taken the time to do that research about us.
He's asking specifically about the SAT, how that's the optional, yeah.
Sorry, that's why I was asking. I thought I heard optional essay.
That was a good answer, though.
How much do we weigh as a test optional school?
Yeah.
I think the essay on the SAT.
Yeah, the essay on the SAT. We don't consider it.
Sorry about that.
We tell the students to take it just in case a college is looking for it. So
Take it. It might be applicable for other institutions.
there you go. Thank you.
Yeah, and it might be applicable to specific majors. So you would see, if you're applying to an English program, journalism, communication arts, or something that requires research writing, they might ask for it.
It's very helpful. Thank you, guys.
How much time do you spend reviewing the average applicant?
That's a really good question. It very much depends on the applicant. It can be anywhere from 10 minutes to a half hour. It really kind of depends on the criteria and what a student has provided. So it's a pretty wide range.
Different Board of Admissions will have different office setups in how they review applications. For example, at BU, one person, the first reader, will be the first person to read your application. From then, they make a recommendation of a committee to send it to, and then from that committee, they usually send it to one more committee, and then they make a decision. So there's usually 3 to 4 different people who are looking at your application before making a decision. Know that first reader, they might be reading anywhere from 50 to 80 applications in a day, and think about a 9 to 5 schedule, how many minutes you can provide to each application. So you want to make sure that your application, it's precise, you've proofread everything, it's clean, it looks right, and that you're really putting your best foot forward, because you don't know how much time that person might be spending on your application.
Yeah, I guess I'll even echo that. I mean, I think 50 to 80 is actually a pretty good assessment of often what various schools are looking to get through. And to give Trinity specific, we have multiple readers looking at an application in the first round, and then we make our recommendation to again discuss that application in the committee at a later date.
How much does race impact someone's application?
How much does, race? Not at all for us.
So I'm going to comment that, so the question is, how does race impact a student's application? So your whole person is what we're considering. Are you the first student in your family to ever go to college? Are you someone from an area of the U.S. that we don't typically see? Are you from Central Massachusetts? And we do have a handful of students coming from Central Massachusetts. We're really trying to take into consideration how can we build the most interesting, diverse class, and that's diversity in many different aspects. Race is included in that.
So if a student applies to a test optional school and submits a test, does that show you anything about them as a student?
I mean, this is the first year for Framingham State to be test optional. When a student applies test optional but then chooses to send us their scores anyway, we will review their application under whatever conditions they have requested. So we will typically, unless they ask us to review their application with their SATs, we would review them without them. So we need to hear, if a student applies test optional and then sends their test scores and would like that to be part of their read process, we would need to hear from the student to take those into consideration.
We have one test optional program that's for our College of Fine Arts because you are submitting either an audition or a portfolio in lieu of a test. If you do submit the test, we do review them. Think critically, is this a strong test compared to the average admitted student for BU in this example? If it's well below the average, chances are it's not going to help you. If it's well above the average, great, submit it. It demonstrates that you can take that test really well. But if you don't think it's going to put you in the best light, probably don't submit it. It's a test optional program.
When it comes to your acceptance rate, what exactly are you looking for acceptance? When it comes to like accepting like applications and like students into your college, how do you manage like going through the options to pick who and who cannot be accepted?
So many schools will talk about this, and I think we all have a similar process. It's a holistic review process, so that means we consider many layers of an application when making a decision. So we're looking at you first as a student in academics. How well do you do in the classroom? What are your grades? And what classes are you taking? Are they very challenging classes? Then I'm going to look at those essays. What do you share with me? What do other people share with me? And the letters of recommendation. Extracurriculars, how do you get involved? Do you work? Do you take care of a family member? Are you involved in clubs? And then with all that information and standardized testing, we make a decision. So there's no one area where I'm going to say, oh, this is the make or break piece. It all layers on top of one layer on top of another, so we have a very kind of well-rounded picture of who you are when we make our decisions.
Yeah, it's sort of going through each layer that we've been talking about, and again, showing us what you want considered in your application. We're going through each part of it, and again, making a holistic assessment of who you are and your capabilities in your college readiness.
And one thing that you'll find is a little bit different about the state university system is that typically our minimum admissions criteria are publicized on our websites, and that's a legislated thing by the Board of Higher Ed. So students can sort of see and get an idea of what our first criteria is going to be in terms of minimum GPA and SAT score, and those are available on our websites. That may be different for specific programs. So things like I mentioned earlier, our food and nutrition program or an engineering program at UMass Lowell, or some schools might have more selective programs within those criteria. But you can see for the public universities what some of those guidelines would be for the first step. And then from there, it's comparable to the other schools. It's more of a holistic approach to sort of determine a student who's best fit.
I know we have a question over there. I do want to ask something, though, real quick. Does legacy play a factor?
For BU, it's a consideration, much like anything else. I'm not going to say that this is going to be the thing that changes how we read your application. It might give you a little bump in the right direction. All it shows is that you have a little bit of a connection to the university, and maybe later on, if we do admit you, there's a better chance you might enroll, but it's not going to completely change your application.
Thanks.
So how do admissions committees like to see students spend their summers? So do they prefer jobs, internships, volunteering, summer programs, or starting your own kind of thing?
All of it. We like to see students who are engaged, throughout the year, but also over the summer. So anything from a job, an internship, service opportunities, those are, tell us some great things about a student's involvement outside of school, and kind of what kind of things they're interested in pursuing. I have seen a student, though, like I recently reviewed a student who interned she had thought that she really wanted to go into politics, so she got an internship at the State House in her home state. and then through that process realized that she did not want to go to politics. So part of her supplemental essay was that she wanted to explain that this was a valuable experience for her because it guided her in terms of avoiding a certain major. And so we just want to see, that a student is involved, and I don't think that Fortnite, and things like that can be demonstrated on a college application. So make sure you're occupying your time appropriately with constructive activities, because that's what we're looking for. So.
Pretty relevant example.
Well, unless you're a serious e-gamer, and then that might be a different consideration.
Unless your Twitch account.
Yeah.
For the SAT versus the ACT, do you say that we just pick the one that you think shows our better score academically, or if you take both, do you think we should put in both, or just pick one? Is there one you prefer most of the time?
Yeah, we have no preference on SAT versus ACT. Again, it's just about I guess getting an understanding of maybe what our average scores look like, and then determining again if it makes sense for you to submit, and ultimately making a decision for yourself as to whether or not you want us to consider those scores in your application. But no preference either way.
We have no preference. You can submit as many tests as you want. We super score for both. We only look at the highest result. Super score simply means that if you've taken the SAT 3 different times, and on the math, your first time around you did excellent, English not so well, and then the next time around you did really, really well on the English, we'll take both of those scores and we'll create the highest score, the super score. We do the same for the ACT. We have no preference, and if you submit both the ACT and the SAT, we only look at the higher of the two. So we have a way, we can put it on a scale so that they're kind of on the same numbers that we can look at. That's a question you should ask every institution you're applying to, so you know if you are submitting multiple tests, are they going to super score them, and are they only going to look at the best exam? There are other institutions that will look at all of your test scores, including lower test scores. So that's a question you usually have to reach out and ask, or it will be published on their admissions website.
All right, thank you. We do have to wrap it up. We end at 9 o'clock, and it looks like it's 9 o'clock. Thank you guys for coming, and you guys asked excellent questions.
Hello?